Hey guys, welcome back to Glam Finds. And today I'm here with something a little bit different. I have Jake Segreto from Segreto Fragrances, and we're going to do a little interview. Say hi, Jake.
Hey, Sarah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on. We actually have some questions for you. I did a review of a few of your fragrances. I think it'll have posted last week. Technically, it's actually today that it posted, and people had some questions. So I thought, let's get a few of those questions out of the way.
Sure.
I think the question that probably everybody has, because I feel like this is the most common question in Fragcom, is what were your gateway fragrances into this expensive hobby?
Oh my goodness. So now we're going to go all the way back and maybe date myself a little bit because I started collecting fragrances in the late 1980s and really hit my stride in the early 90s. So I want to say the very first fragrance I ever had, I mean, aside from my dad's Skin Bracer, of course, because everybody had that, right? And then he gave me a bottle of English leather. That didn't do anything for me. But then I noticed that as we were, getting into junior high, a lot of my friends were starting to wear things like polo, and these were real fragrances. They had depth. They had, things going on. It was interesting. Uh, Calvin Klein's Obsession that was is my go-to. That was the first fragrance that I actually purchased. Uh, department store, not a drugstore, bottom shelf purchase. Actually shelled out some money for it. And then from there, it was just over. I had to keep going back, and I think I got Calvin Klein's Eternity and Escape after that, and then found mini bottles of Azaro, Poram, and Kuros, and Dior Fahrenheit. And it was just I spent way too much money in my teen years collecting fragrances.
Really, that's pretty young to be able to get into those level of fragrances.
Well, things were cheaper back then, so
So it kind of sounds like a lot of powerhouse fragrances were what got you into it.
yeah, I'm trying to think if there was anything. I mean, that's a lot of what men's fragrances were back then. I guess the like Eternity and Escape were maybe a little more freshy style, not quite so heavily top loaded with like oak moss and civet and those kinds of things. But yeah, there were a lot of those really beastly scents back then.
Are you still into fragrances like that now, or did
Oh,
you kind of?
absolutely. That's
Yeah.
that's where I live. So, in fact, you did the review, which was a great review, by the way. Thank you very much for that. But you reviewed my Segreto signature scent, and that was very much the whole point behind that scent. As you mentioned in the review, I wanted to create something that would be my go-to. What would I wear if I could just create your desert island scent? And I thought, no, it would have to be a throwback to when I first started collecting. It would have to be something that's got that, the animalics and the Chypre style. So yeah, I do tend to favor those scents.
Well, that's kind of interesting. Um, were those the fragrances that inspired you at the beginning of your journey to start creating, or was it something in specific?
That's a good question. So as I think you and I talked about, I had done some work for Alexandria Fragrances, not helping them make their fragrances, but doing more of like business development and marketing and helping to expand their reach. And I think that was really when I first kind of got exposed to the world of niche fragrances and the clones from Alexandria that kind of exposed me to that whole world. I think one of the first ones I got from Alexandria was their version of Tobacco Vanille by Tom Ford and Tuscan Leather by Tom Ford. Um, so that was the doorway into, oh, there's this whole other top shelf level of stuff that's out there from Parfums de Marly and whoever else. So those were kind of the gateway into you know oh, and you can clone stuff. You got to understand when I when I first discovered clones, it was back in the 80s. It was the dollar store $5 bottle of it would be Polo for men, but it'd be called like Green Horse or something, and they were terrible. The clones back then were just garbage. They had to be like 5% fragrance and 95% alcohol. They would evaporate immediately. You were lucky if they got 80% close to the scent that they were trying to mimic. So rediscovering clones several years back with Alexandria was like, oh wow, we've come a long way in being able to do very very close replicas.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I feel like nowadays I don't usually buy clones because of the price. I actually buy them because of performance now because they typically blow the regular one out of the water.
Absolutely. Yep. That was something I noticed right away when I started purchasing from Alexandria. And I went, looked around for other clone houses at that point too, because now curiosity was up. But absolutely, like with all the reformulations in standard designer sense today, performance was always a problem. Suddenly I'm wearing these clones and like, wow, these are lasting 8, 9, 10 hours. It's amazing that you can do that.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big difference. And actually, what was it like working with those other fragrance houses now that we're kind of on that subject?
It was a lot of fun. I mean, to kind of get behind the scenes a little bit. I loved working with Handy Huff as Alexandria. I did a lot of, like I said, marketing for them, trying to get them into brick and mortar stores. I was on the phone with some places around here to see if we could get them into stores. Um, just a whole wide world of fragrances, though, and it was through Handy and through my work doing kind of the business outreach stuff that I met EJ Wells, who does Happy Land fragrances, because he had come on board to create solid fragrances. I don't know if you've really experimented with those, but he started making solid fragrances for Alexandria, and that's how I met EJ and kind of got to see him launch his own uh, fragrance house and kind of talk with him behind the scenes. He's the one that really inspired me, though, to like start playing around with the original blends.
Okay, so that's how you started doing your own just custom ones, no longer clones, kind of just talking to EJ.
Yeah, the clone thing, I started doing clones, somewhere in that period of time, when I was working with Alexandria and saying that you could do this, and the kind of thought, well, I would get tired of waiting for other clone houses to come out with stuff that I wanted to wear, right? So, like, let's say that I wanted to have Gucci Rush. Well, nobody's got that. Genre doesn't have it, Dua doesn't have it, Alexandria doesn't have it. So you could ask, can you please do this clone? And you might wait months and months and maybe never see it. And I thought, well, if I can figure out how to do this, I did it for me. I never intended to be selling my fragrances. It was purely to stock my own shelves with clones that I wanted. I'd give them away as gifts to family and friends. Like my mother-in-law wanted Poison, the original Dior Poison. I mean, you can't find that. You can't find a clone of that. So I did that for her for a Christmas gift. But then little by little, after I opened up the Facebook group, Attack of the Fragrance Clones, which was really just created as a place where you could come and discuss all the clone brands that you wanted. Um, Little by little, I started selling like the leftovers that I'd made. So I've got a little too much of this or that. So I'd say anybody want to, buy a bottle for $25 or something, and it just sort of grew from there. Because then people started figuring out like, oh, we can request. He'll do special requests. So can you make Versace metal jeans? Like, yeah, okay, well, all these little one-off requests that I did. But yeah, through that period, talking with EJ, I kind of got bored with doing just clones and started exploring this idea of, multi-layered blends of 5, 6, 7 different things, playing around with, civet and with oak moss and jasmine and that kind of thing.
Well, now that you're talking about that, how long did it take you to figure out how to put together a well blended fragrance once you started tampering with notes? Because I mean, you can pick up, like, I picked up like Ambroxan and ISOE Super, and I've got ethanol and stuff. And I almost got, brave and picked up other stuff, but I was like, I already know I'm going to make a huge mess. How long did it take you to actually make something that you would want to wear?
Oh, that's a really good question. In many ways, I'm still figuring that out. I'm still experimenting with stuff. I throw out a lot of stuff, honestly. I'm being a lot more methodical about it now. So you talk about like the casino resort that you reviewed was just kind of a haphazard idea. Like, what if I put Baccarat Rouge and Virgin Island water together? Do they blend well? And then it's messing around with the levels, because that key lime accord just kind of overpowers everything at first, but then you balance out the Baccarat Rouge, and nope, now you've lost the notes, for the top. So constantly trying to find the balance. I throw out so many of my little 5 mil samplers that I mix these in. Um, Really just a lot of trial and error. And I would say it took me a good 7 or 8 months of messing around with different things before I finally felt like, okay, I have a good idea of what notes go well, what ones, are polarizing and overlap, and, that sort of thing.
That's not too bad. I mean, 7, 8 months to figure it out. And were you this is when you were just making them for yourself, right? And as
Right,
gifts and stuff that you couldn't find and stuff that was going to take too long for other clone houses to come out with.
right.
Okay. And when did you start with the custom fragrances? Because I'm curious about that. I know people have asked you for them, not only fragrances that other clone houses aren't cloning, but actual custom fragrances, like certain notes that people are looking for. That's what I've heard. I haven't heard too much about it, but I know you do that. Tell me a little bit about that.
So that I want to say might have been towards the end of 2019, and that started with a friend of mine who wanted to give a Christmas gift to a friend of his and said, I want you to make a custom scent for me. And I want something that's got like tobacco. And he starts describing the profile of the person that he's giving this to. Like, he likes a good glass of whiskey and he likes a good cigar, but he's also kind of an outdoorsy, likes the camping and stuff. And so that's when I started putting together this concept of something that had whiskey and tobacco and also maybe a little bit of a smoke effect to it. And the end result was the fragrance that I call Whiskey Business. And I only put that out once a year. It comes out in the fall, and because it's kind of a special thing, I don't want to like cheapen it by having it just out there all the time. But I gave him this bottle, and he loved it, and I had a little bit left over for myself. I think I had a couple bottles left over, so I think I sold a couple through the fragrance group, and then of course everybody wants it because it's like, what is this? This is so cool. And I thought, should I make that like available because it was a personalized gift. But I have a hard time saying no to fellow obsessive frag heads, that just want to get their nose on something new. So that's why I bring it out in the fall once a year.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And actually, I'm gonna skip around here. So in talking about custom fragrances, because I know I talked to you about this before, what direction are you planning on going with your fragrances and kind of rough draft, where do you kind of see it going in maybe 5 years from now?
Well, so at the end of 2020 is kind of when I made the decision, hey, we're starting a new year, and I've been doing all these, original blends and different things. Um, but starting in 2021, I said to myself, I kind of want to make that the focus. I'm kind of done with just cloning things. One thing that's changed is sort of the marketplace in the last couple years. Even back when I was with Alexandria, you had Alexandria do I think genre Sensual Obsessions were probably the four big players, but that was kind of it. And it seems like in the last 6 months, there's a new clone house popping up every couple of weeks. And so I kind of thought, do I really need to be the guy who's making yet one more version of Creative Ventus, when there's so many other places you can get it? Which is why I encourage the discussion in my group, by the way. You can talk about any brand there you want, even though that's where I sell my stuff. If you want to come in there and talk about, 3-in-1 or Dapper or whoever, that's completely fine. Find the absolute best version of whatever clone and then come and tell the rest of us about it because we all want to know. But I don't want to make them anymore. I don't want to do just the straight clones unless it's something, that I'm really, really, really interested in, or if something that somebody else asks for special request. I still want to be able to meet that need for people. It's like if nobody's doing whatever clone you're asking for, and it has some special meaning or memory to you, sure, I'll bust out the stuff and do that. But this is the year that I really want to just focus on the creativity. I want to do my own stuff. I want to experiment with a lot of different, weird things. Did I ever send you Council of the Gods? I
No,
can't
but I've
remember.
seen the notes for that one and it looks really good.
So that's a perfect example of what I'm wanting to do this year. Is I thought to myself, can I take sort of an 80s style powerhouse type scent, like the ones that we were talking about, like a Chanel Antheus, and mix it with a modern, you know, think of something like Invictus, right? Something that you would say, well, that's a young man's gone clubbing type of scent. They all have that same sort of scent profile. And I thought, can you put those two things together and make that work? You shouldn't be able to. They're polar opposites, right? One's young man, one's sort of old classic man. But I started playing with some different blends and really, really loved the final result. But that was purely because I wanted a challenge. I wanted to see if I could make this work when it should never, ever anyway work. So that's the 2021 goal, is just exercise creativity and have some fun.
And then long term, how do you want to grow?
Oh, like grow the business. I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of
Because it's
don't.
gonna grow. I mean, your people know about you and more people are finding out about you. So it's gonna grow in one direction or another, right? At this
Yeah,
point it's inevitable.
It probably is, but I'm taking that, like, I'm a slow adapter, I guess, to some of that stuff. Like when I started doing the clones, I had some people initially saying, "You're going to start a business," and I said, "I'm not going to start a business. This is a hobby. I want it to be a hobby. I want it to be fun." Well, I'm at the point now where it's actually a business, so it took me a couple of years to kind of grow into that and say, "Well, I guess I have to do this." Do I want to grow it any further? Not really. I'm kind of happy with where it's at. I get a steady flow of orders. I only open ordering on the weekends because that's all I can do. I have a 45, 50 hour a week job that takes up a lot of my time. I've got a family. I have other hobbies. So I take orders on the weekend, and the family gathers around and helps me, package and bottle things up. And I've often thought, if the business were to like double in size this year, would I even be able to keep up with it, or would I just say, okay, that's enough? Like now you can only place orders by request. I've got my list of you know veteran customers that I'll still serve, but no more. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what it comes to.
But you're currently focusing on probably, are you going to stop doing clones or just the ones that are like, I guess maybe really hard to find discontinued ones? And then mostly everything just kind of going indie from here on out?
Yeah, it's more of a question of emphasis in what I'm putting out there. Because I used to, I would do my clones and then I'd have whatever the 5 or 6 clones of the week were that I did, and then I would put them out on the Facebook group and say, "Here's what I've got. Come and get it." Or people would come and make requests for things. Like I said, now I'm much more focused on doing the original blends, and the trends are people want to get that stuff now because it's different. That's the whole thing. It's fun. It's unique. It's not something that you're going to get anywhere else. But like I said, if people still want me to do, I did just have a request for Versace metal jeans, and thought, well, if I can do it and connect this person with a memory, from the 1990s, then I'll happily do that. But that's not the product that I'm going to push. I'm not going to promote it. I'm not going to do, a 10 bottle run of some of these and say, okay, now come and pick these up. So it's all indie original stuff from here on out.